Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our Friday panel on the Smith government making the separation referendum question official. But first, province-wide protests. This is a midday view of downtown Edmonton, one of at least 20 rallies and marches being held in cities and communities across Alberta today, all part of what has been billed as a day of protest by Labour and non-Labour groups and individuals. And joining us now, Alberta Federation of Labour President Gil McGowan. Mr. McGowan, appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Hey, Michael, thanks for joining us on our march.
Okay, well, now the AFL has been in the driver's seat primarily here, organizing this day of protest. What makes this multitude of rallies and marches necessary?
Well, when people ask me what the day of protest about, as I say, look around. It's everything from separatism to two-tier health care to attacks on education, attacks on our constitutional rights, including the right to strike. We've got a government in this province, Michael, frankly, that's gone rogue. They're implementing an agenda that no one ever voted for. Even the people who voted for the UCP didn't vote for pulling Alberta out of CPP. They certainly didn't vote for separatism. And what we wanted to do is provide a platform for all of our fellow Albertans who think that we're on the wrong direction, that we want to pull our province back from the brink. This is about saving the province that we love, Michael.
Safe to say this is, by and large part, the Labour movement looking to send the Smith government a message?
Well, I'm actually very pleased that you asked that question, because the short answer is no, Michael. The Labour movement acted as a catalyst. We used our organization and our infrastructure to create a platform for all of our fellow Albertans to protest. But I'll tell you, we didn't do this from the centre. We created multiple organizing committees in 16 different communities, big cities, small towns, medium-sized cities, and those committees are not just Labour. In fact, the big committee in Calgary is not even led by Labour. Here in Edmonton, it's mostly unions doing the organizing. But these people are union, they're non-union. The thing that they have in common is that they love Alberta. Just listen, they are singing "Oh Canada" right now. This is the majority of Albertans. The silent majority have been drowned out by the UCP and their separatist friends. We're standing up, pushing back, and trying to take our province back.
Okay, you're demanding government action on a number of fronts, but how does the increasingly dominant element of separation and the pending referendum fit into the larger protest equation?
Well, I'll answer that in two ways. The first way is this is the way we fight back, by finding each other, because one of the things that the Conservatives and the separatists want to do is give the impression that they speak for all Albertans, so they're leaving people demoralized. They're trying to distract us, demoralize us, and silence us. But when we get together in protests like this, people who have a different view of our province, a more inclusive view of our province, a more forward-looking view, they realize that they're not alone, and in fact, we're the majority. That's what these protests are about. It's about showing people that they're not alone and that they have power when they come together. We don't have to let the separatists speak for us, Michael.
What's the likelihood, though, this action, even as large as you're aiming for it to be, will move or influence the provincial government in any perceptible way?
Yeah, well, Michael, we have no illusions. This day of protest is important, but it's not important because it's going to change Danielle Smith's mind. It's important because we're building a movement that will sweep her from power. That's really what's happening here. We're bringing people together, helping them find their strength, and by doing that, we're changing the political landscape. Right now, they dominate the political landscape, whether it's Danielle Smith or those con men from the separatist groups. They're the loudest voices, but, you know, when they don't listen, we get louder. That's what we say. Well, listen, Michael, I'm going to have to go because I'm supposed to be emceeing this event.
Okay. One more quick one for you, though. Is this a one and done, Gil?
Yeah, sure.
How much of a sustained movement do you see this driving?
Well, like I say, this is not necessarily about forcing Danielle Smith to change her mind tomorrow, but it is about changing the political landscape in our province, and that's something that you build over time. We're restacking the deck. We're changing the political landscape one Albertan at a time, right? That's what this is about. Albertans finding each other and finding strength in each other and finding hope in each other and using that hope and that solidarity to change our province and more into a vision that is more in line with what what all these fellow Albertans want, right? So Daniel Smith and the UCP, they're one brand of Albertan. This is the other brand of Albertans, and we have a different idea of what our future should look like. And what we're saying today and in future demonstrations is that we're going to fight for that different future.
All right, we'll leave it there. Appreciate your time, Mr. McGowan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. Take care.
Gil McGowan, president of the Alberta Federation of Labour. From referendum ballots to stunted summer travel plans, picking weeds in the Alberta capital, and a billboard with a very personal appeal. Time now for tonight's Primetime This Week panel. And joining us this evening, Alex Boyd, an Alberta-based national reporter for the Toronto Star, and Marty Chan, award-winning author, playwright, and writer. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with locking in the referendum question that could trigger a future vote on separation.
We've got about 1 million Albertans who are frustrated with a relationship with Ottawa to a point where they think it's time to file the divorce papers. I don't feel that way.
Daniel Smith doubling down this week on the need to hold a referendum vote. And now the Premier and her cabinet have issued an order in council that confirms phrasing of the multiple choice question, which will read, should Alberta remain a province of Canada, or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada. According to Elections Alberta, the question will be at the top of an ordered stack of 10 color-coded ballots on October 19th, and that an elector may refuse any or all ballots at the voting station. Further, 38 million printed ballots will be needed to be printed for the vote, and administering and counting the referendum requiring 60,000 to 90,000 election officers. Alex, I'll start with you. What's to be made of the degree of resources needed, and how that might play with blowback building over the separation question alone?
I would love to be a fly on the wall in terms of the logistics meetings. I can only imagine are happening or getting underway this week in terms of what it's going to take to actually get people to the polls, vote on 10 different ballots, and then count those ballots by hand. We saw quite significant lineups during the last municipal election, which was the first election held after electronic tabulators were banned in the province. And that took a lot of time. It took a long time for results to come in. And so I can only imagine how much planning, how much people hours, how much logistics is going to go into making sure that this goes off smoothly. And so, there's a real sense, I think, at least where I am in the province, of us crossing the Rubicon in the last couple days, in the sense that, we've talked a lot about a potential referendum. It's actually happening. I think a lot of people are just kind of waking up to the fact that this is happening. And so as they start to reckon with it, this idea that there is so much resources going into this, I think is going to be a big part of that conversation.
Marty, we're just looking at images there of what will be on the ballot. As a wordsmith, how do you feel the structure of the question and the fact that it's multiple choice fits into this whole equation?
Let me tell you a quick story. When I was in university, I had a professor who took great delight in combing through his students' essays and plucking out examples of the worst writing ever. And every couple of weeks, he would spend the first 5 or 10 minutes of the class writing those examples on the board. And then with almost orgasmic glee, he would dissect those examples of poor writing. If that referendum question was put in front of my professor, it would be the equivalent of Viagra. He would be hard for months. This is an example of the kind of baffle-gab that comes together when you've got a politician with an agenda mixed with bureaucracy. It is, I think I went through the Fleisch-Kincaid Index, which basically determines the reading level of writing or sentences or stories. And you have to be a college graduate to actually be able to parse out what this second part of that multiple choice question is. So it is a way for her to try to address what Albertans have wanted with the petition from Forever Canadian, and also to satisfy the separatist base within the UCP and it's just wound up being a very confusing, confounding mess.
Alex, a stack of 10 ballots, the big question on top, following 9 on constitutional and immigration reform. How much of an exercise is this going to be for Alberta voters, and how likely are they to be engaged?
You know, I've met people this week that aren't aware yet that a referendum is happening. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done to making sure people are aware this is happening and getting people up to speed. I'm also worried about the fact that there are 10 questions here, which I think is getting missed. Like the separatist question is getting, probably fairly most of the attention, but it will go on top of a stack of 9 other ballots reflecting questions on immigration, on abolishing the Senate, on things that really could very radically change Alberta's relationship to the rest of Canada, to our own history, to newcomers to this province, and so there's a lot of work to be done as well to make sure that people are aware of the big question, of course, but also that they're prepared to make a decision, and a decision that reflects their values on the other 9 as well. All right.
Well, some Albertans may have more time on their hands to ponder the pending referendum, with the state of gas prices expected to put a damper on summer travel plans. A new survey by TD shows 1/3 of Canadians plan to spend less this summer, 44% of whom say high fuel costs are influencing their decisions. And of those who do plan to travel, 3/4 intend to stay within Canada.
They do want to travel. So what they're looking at is maybe shorter trips instead of a week, 5 days, maybe staying home, a domestic travel versus going international to Europe or other places.
And according to travel website Kayak, Alberta stands to benefit, especially with demand for vacations in the Calgary region surging.
It's in the top 3 most popular domestic spots and actually in the top 10 most popular destinations, up there alongside London and Lisbon. Now,
bucking the budget-conscious trend are Gen Z Canadians. The TD survey suggests 1 in 4 plan to spend more this summer, 32% of whom say social pressures influence their spending decisions. Alex, what's to be said about the Gen Z crowd being the outlier?
It's been a rough couple of years, and there's been a lot written about this idea of financial nihilism, which is this idea that young people are losing faith in the ability to plan for long-term financial security. They're not necessarily seeing the same pathways to saving, to retirement, to buying houses that, people that came before them did. And so they're increasingly saying, you know what, whatever, I'm going to go out and spend on experiences. And while I think it's important to take kind of these large generational trends with a grain of salt, I can see some fairness to that. And also, again, it's been a rough few years. If they want to spend their money in terms of getting out, seeing a little bit more of the country, I can understand that.
Marty, is it just the high price of fuel that's keeping so many of us at home or closer to home this summer? Where do you weigh in on Canadians expecting to travel less over the next few months?
I think fuel has part of it, but I think the bigger part for sort of domestic travel, there used to be a lot of Canadians that would go across the border, visit the States, and of course with the Orange Madman down south, disparaging Canada at every turn. It has had an impact on Canadian tourism. I think Statistics Canada noted about a 25% decline in Canadians visiting the United States in the last year. So if you had an option between crossing the border and going into the insanity that is Donald Trump world, or going to Calgary, for example, or Banff, or across the street, I think people, especially in Canada, would choose to sort of support local than to try to travel down south. So I think there's a couple of factors at play here.
Yeah, awesome to see that Calgary's on that list of top 10 destinations, right up there with London and Lisbon as places for the world to go visit. All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the search for people to pick weeds and placing a personal ad in a very public space. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. Weeds are more than just an eyesore. They can also be invasive, and they're finding plenty of opportunity to grow here in Alberta.
As we're getting less rain, drought-tolerant species are able to take root here. As summers are getting longer and hotter, species are able to come up earlier and start to grow sooner and faster. So it just is opening up doors for a whole host of new plants that could become invasive.
And the city of Edmonton could use some help with the situation, seeking out volunteers to sign up for weed pulling events. Staff will be on hand with insight on plant identification and tips on removal.
Get a little bit of information about what invasive plants are, see firsthand the impacts that they have on biodiversity throughout the city's parks and natural areas, and try their hand at pulling them out.
The city of Edmonton hosting more than 50 weed pulling events this spring and summer, and yeah, they will be providing the tools, gloves, even snacks. Marty, property owners, we should certainly be picking our own weeds, but should it be the responsibility of volunteers to roll up their sleeves and help a municipality pick invasive plants, snacks or not?
Sure, I'm all for community spirit. Wait, hold on. 6.9% property tax increase. No, wait a minute. If I'm paying taxes, maybe we should have a little bit of give and take here. I'm happy to pull weeds if it means that I'm paying a smaller tax increase next year. But I mean, I have a love-hate battle with the city in terms of, like, not only, weed control, but road maintenance. I remember, was it back in the winter? I think Councillor Michael Jans was trying to post on social media a helpful tip to homeowners to try to chip away the ice dam that built over the drains. And I kept thinking, well, if the city crews could clear out those drains, maybe we wouldn't have the ice dams in the first place. So I think while I appreciate the effort to try to encourage community spirit, maybe there should be a little more focus in terms of making sure that the maintenance crews at the city are actually able to do their job properly.
Now, Alex, is there a lesson to be learned here about the state of our environment, if it is that weeds are having an easier time of taking root in Alberta?
Yeah, I mean, I think given all the news happening in the headlines over the last couple of years, I think it might be easy to think that climate change has kind of fallen off the radar, or maybe perhaps is not happening. But it is still a factor that are affecting everything from the weather to the ability of new invasive weeds to move in. So I think it's a reminder that is still happening. I can understand why kind of the public education piece then becomes important, because if you want people to pull weeds on their own property or keep an eye out for this sort of thing, they have to be able to recognize it. And if you grew up in Alberta and maybe aren't familiar with some of these new invasive species, I can understand why making sure that people are actually able to pull the weeds and are actually able to do this work, if we're going to expect it to do it on their own properties, becomes important.
All right, one more topic, and that is an Albertan turning his attention to a different kind of screen in the search for love.
There's my sign.
Spencer Griffin-Beale is taking an unconventional approach to finding a soulmate. Billboard advertising at a busy Edmonton intersection.
Marriage is very important to me, and I'm looking for a life partner, a wife. I had to think outside the box and think of a way that I can stick out more than all the online profiles.
The 40-year-old from Spruce Grove says conventional dating methods just aren't panning out, and he's frustrated with online attempts, a dating landscape where technology has made it easier to meet people, but maybe not the right people.
Lots of concerns about bad actors or maybe dishonest users, and enhanced digital tools to facilitate people not putting their real selves forward.
As for getting creative, there are plenty of options.
A lot of people will use business cards. They'll have their name, number on it, Instagram, whatever it is. It'll say, if you're single, let me know. Or I see friends will put on like a QR code or something, and they'll be like, this is my single friend.
For anyone wondering, Griffin-Beale's website is maryspencer.ca. Alex, in going to this extent, what does it say about navigating the dating scene in 2026?
I mean, I don't think I've ever met anyone who hasn't said that the dating scene, is kind of a garbage fire. So this does not, reflect positively on it. I think, good for Spencer. He's going outside the box, shows initiative, shows he can afford a billboard. Those aren't cheap. So, it seems as much as it's an indictment, I think, of modern app dating. It's an interesting strategy. Good for him.
Marty, any advice, encouragement for this 40-year-old man as he continues the search for someone to marry?
If he's going to use a billboard, he's got to come up with some slogans, right? You deserve a Spencer today, or I wish he was from Wetaskiwin. Love costs less in Wetaskiwin. No, love costs less in Spruce Grove. I wish him all the best. It is a creative choice, and I hope that he's able to find somebody who's got a sense of humor at the very least. And I wish him all the best. But come up with a slogan, dude.
Well, and I think we'll have to follow up and see how he does, whether or not his billboard was successful. All right, we've left ourselves with enough time for a round of winners and losers. Alex? Who or what's topping your lists this week?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm in Calgary, and I know a lot of folks here are looking skyward today. There's a lot of rain expected in Calgary and southern Alberta, so I guess that makes us losers in the sense that, we're all going to have to be preparing for that and watching for that this weekend. Winners, though, I have been reminded that a lot of, the flood mitigation stuff that Calgary's been working on the last few years has come online. So, the situation now is not what the situation was 10 years ago. So in that sense, we are both winners and losers.
Yeah, lots of eyes on the skies and the waterways as well in the Calgary region. Okay, Marty, take it home. Winners and losers.
All right. My loser, to circle back to your first topic, I would have to say, would be Danielle Smith and her attempt to appease her separatist base with the referendum question and her am I or am I not a separatist? And I would say the winner is Premier Wab Kinew, who was able to fact check her in real time at that press conference from the First Minister's Conference, where he basically said, okay, Premier Smith, we talked about this in private, but if you're going to continue with misinformation, let me correct the record for everybody.
All right. We'll leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly for this. Hope you have an awesome weekend.
Thanks, Michael.
Take care.
Welcome back, and we'll wind things down with a few responses to a recent post from CTV News, and they come from our interview with lawyer Keith Wilson, and that was on his pro-independence stance and the Alberta Transition Council initiative. Murtaza, that is, writes, most of the problems he is mentioning are not just Alberta-specific, but also Canada-wide. In fact, pretty much the entire world at this stage. Just because Albertans have problems doesn't mean you break away. Toby says, smells like Brexit, all sunshine and rainbows if they separate. Andrew asks, what about the impact of external forces using cyberspace to push a mandate that weakens Canada's ability to renegotiate stronger and more fair terms consequent to the new trade norms? Well, one cannot ignore the pro-separatists' views. It's disheartening to see how they ignore the possibility of being manipulated. And Jacqueline thinks Smith should call an election instead of pretending to govern by referendum. Remember, you can always have a say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. That is our program for tonight. Have a great evening and a great weekend, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.